The Gemara tells us in many places we have a principle called Ase Docha Lo Sase. That if you have a conflict between a positive commandment and a negative commandment, the positive commandment wins. For instance, the Gemara learns out from the juxtaposition of the psukim to put the mitzvah of tzitzis near the mitzvah of shatnez, of the prohibition of mixing wool and linen. So from here the Gemara learns out that Ase Docha Lo Sase, the one could have wool and linen tzitzis, and as well one could have in the big day kahuna wool and linen if you're doing it b'makom mitzvah. So we have a principle, Ase Docha Lo Sase. I think there are about 7, 8, 9 cases in the Gemara of Ase Docha Lo Sase. And as we'll get to the Ramban in Parashas Yisro tells us, because Ase signifies the symbolic of love, by doing a positive commandment you show your love for God, and avoiding a negative commandment shows your fear of God. So Ase Docha Lo Sase, serving God out of love is a higher level than serving God out of fear. So it's interesting to note that all the examples of Ase Docha Lo Sase don't apply Bizman Hazeh. Bizman Hazeh for different reasons. We don't have the big day kuna, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, we don't have Tcheles, that's a discussion, but no one says definitively we have Tcheles, Mila B'Tzaras, Yibam, all the different examples of Ase Docha Lo Sase we don't have today. So why is it? So Rav Tzadok HaKohen and others explain, based on a Gemara in Yevama by Abba Shul by Yevama, that an Ase Docha Lo Sase is basically a mitzvah in the form of an Aveira. In other words, it's a mitzvah because the mitzvah overrides, but you have to be careful, because for the Ase to work, one has to do it l'shem shamayim. One has to do it lishma. So they point out that, let's say, when someone does certain averas, you get it makis in the Torah, 40 makis, a good old-fashioned whooping, and it's known. So there's a mitzvah to give out the makis. However, if it's a person you don't like or someone else, then you shouldn't take the job. You should stay far away, because anytime you do a mitzvah in a form of avera, you better make sure you're kulo l'shem shamayim. And we're not on the level today, like Yibam, to marry your sister-in-law kulo l'shem shamayim. So then if you're not, then you're really doing an avera of living with your sister-in-law. So therefore, we're not on that level anymore, so we stay away from Ase Docha Lo Sase, we stay away from mitzvahs in the form of averas, like the famous Chafetz Chaim, when he talks about the prohibition of speaking Lashon Hara. He says, however, for a toeles, for constructive purposes, it's permitted. However, let's say someone calls you up over someone you don't have something good to say. Let's say he was your worker, he was stealing from you, he did inappropriate things, and someone calls you up to ask about him. So he says, even though it might be b'toelos, if you yourself are nogea b'davar, if you yourself are involved with that person, so you have no right to give the lashon hara. That'd be a mitzvah b'tzuras avera. But the Chafetz Chaim writes, you should be yoshev v'hisaras tidam libo. You should sit down and get the hatred out of your heart, then you do it. But who could really do that? So therefore, better not to say over anything, because we're concerned you're going to do a mitzvah in the form of an aveira. In fact, it's the famous Netziv, when Yaakov stole the brothers from Esav and Yitzchak. So when they found out, it says, and Vayechad Chara Gedola, Yitzchak was afraid, but he realized what happened, and Esav, a Sa'aka Gedola. So both when Yaakov stole the breast, he caused harm to both Yitzchak and to Esav. Yet Chazal tell us later on in Jewish history, Mordechai with Haman had a scream as Aka Gedola. That was punishment because Yaakov caused pain to his brother Esav. Even though he was doing what he was supposed to doing, he was fulfilling the nevuah his mother told them, but nevertheless, since he caused pain, so therefore later on he had to be punished. The Jewish people were punished. So the question is, how come we don't find any punishment for causing pain to Yitzchak? We only find pain for causing punishment to Yaakov. So the Tziv points out, because since there was a mitzvah in the form of Aveira, you have to be Kuo L'Shem Shamayim. So if you're doing the lie, it has to be truly for the sake of what's best for Klal Yisrael. So when he lied to Yitzchak, he didn't get any hana from it. He wished he could tell the father the truth, but what could he do? He had to lie L'Shem Shamayim. However, when it came to Esav, even though it was L'Shem Shamayim, but as they say, he must have had a little geshmak, he had a little hana. And from the little benefit he got from his getting back at Esav, so therefore he was punished. So therefore when it comes to doing things, mitzvahs in this form and Aveira, you always have to be careful, but you have to be even extra careful when it comes into the form and Aveira. And as Rav Pam always used to point out, that this is a yisod, this is a foundation in mitzvahs ben adam lechaveiro. That he says many times people get caught up in the ben adam lemakom aspect and don't focus on the ben adam lechaveiro enough. His example he always gives is, let's say, Leil Pesach, the woman in the house, it doesn't have to be the woman in the house, but usually it is, who's preparing all the holiday food, the Pesach, she's working very hard for the Seder, and then of course you want to have a lot to say for the Haggadah, and you want to finish it by Chatzos, so therefore you rush the meal in 20 minutes. So it's not fair to her. She just spent 2 weeks preparing the food, and then you're going to knock it off. So Rabbi used to always say, make sure, so you could speak to her during the meal, you could do more Haggadah afterwards, but make sure that you have time to enjoy the meal as well. And therefore you always have to have the Mishkal HaChasidus. You always have to weigh the balance of when you're doing a mitzvah, not to cause harm to others. In fact, there's a famous Rav Shimon Shkop in the beginning of Nedarim. There's a famous kasha Rav Shimon Shkop asked, and very little people talk about it. The Or Sameach touches on it, but Rav Shimon Shkop goes into it more. He asked, let's say I don't have a lulav, or let's say I don't have matzah. So I should steal the matzah. I should steal the lulav. Why? Because aseh docha lo saseh, the positive mitzvah of lulav, dalad minim, the positive mitzvah of matzah supersedes the aveira of geneva, of stealing. So why don't we say aseh docha lo saseh? Of course you know the Gemara in Sukkah, mitzvah above aveira. It's only a mitzvah of aveira because we don't say aseh docha lo saseh. So why don't we say aseh docha lo saseh? So Rav Shimon Shkop writes, we only say aseh docha lo saseh if it's your aseh and it's your lo saseh, if it's something which only impacts on you. If it's your aveira, so we can say the mitzvah of matzah supersedes the prohibition of chadash. The mitzvah of tzitzis overrides the mitzvah of tzitzis overrides the prohibition of kalayim. So he says that's only true when you have an aseh which has been adam l'makom, and a lav and a lo saseh, and a negative commandment which has been adam l'makom. But geneva has two aspects. One is I shouldn't be a ganav, I shouldn't be stealing. And secondly, I can't cause a loss to another individual. So there's two aspects. So if it was just one aspect, I could say aseh docha lo saseh, the mitzvah of matzah would override the inyan of me going ahead and stealing. However, it doesn't take away. I can't do an asay do chalose and cause another person a loss. That's the whole Mishkalach Hasidus. No asay do chalose asay when it involves ben adam and chavero. And that's what the Ramban in Parashas Yisro was alluding to in the Meshach Chachma at the end of the Zos HaBracha in Perek Lamed Dalet Pasuk Yubeiz on the Pasuk the Chol Hamora Haggadah Asher Asa. He quotes the Ramban and goes into it that why is it asay do chalose asay? Can we said because love overrides fear. Because when you're doing asay, you're showing your love for God. And when you're doing a los asay, you're showing your fear of God. So the Ramban is bothered. Then why is it then if we say asay docha los asay? So why is it then if I have to do a positive mitzvah, I have to spend only 20% of my money. But to avoid a negative commandment, I have to spend kol mamono. So if asay docha los asay, so I should have to spend all my money for an asay and only 20% for a los asay. So the Meshach Chachma already writes, says he quotes the Ramban in Parashas Yisro, and he says, after los asay chamar, even though a los asay is stricter, but misha osa midas atzmo im kena osa maisa umamre gadocheto misha eno osa maisa ve'eno makayim ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, it's true that if I'm doing the asay, so therefore my love, showing love is a higher level. If I'm doing the asay and doing the aveira, so serving God out of love is greater than serving God out of fear. However, what about if the option is either I'm going to do the aveira or not do the mitzvah? So if I do the aveira, that shows I have no fear of God. If I don't do the mitzvah, that shows I have no love of God. Showing you have no fear of God, Hashem, is worse than showing you have no love. So therefore, when it comes to not spending money, so it is stricter because we don't want to show you have no fear of God. That's how the Meshach Chachma explains as well. That's why we don't say asay docha los asay in the Beis HaMikdash, because in the Beis HaMikdash, its focus is on the Yira, the Mora HaShchina. But either way, we see the Ramban is pointing out asay docha los asay, 20% kol mamono, that it's all about weighing the Mishkal HaChasidus, weighing the difference in terms of you always have to weigh the balance, the positives and the negative. And to conclude, I heard from Rabbi Shel Reisman a story in one of his MP3s, that the story with the Mishkal HaChasidus, he says over a story where there was a wealthy man, very stingy, very cheap, never wanted to do chesed, never invited guests over. And one time his wife said, you know what, it's Pesach, Haknazas Orchem, we have to go ahead and have people over. So he said, okay. So he put his name down, he said, okay, only one person, and he goes to the fish store, and the guy he's showing, he never eats fish. But okay, we're having a guest, his wife makes him go. And he shows him all the good fish. Now it's too expensive. The guy in the fish store gets fed up. The guy says, okay. He takes out some fish from the garbage and says, give me $1 and get out of here. So he's happy. He gets it for $1. He puts some spices on it, whatever, will be okay. He brings the guy home and they're getting to the Suda, so he's serving the fish. He says, how come none of you are having fish? He says, we don't eat fish. Okay, so he eats the fish, etc. They have the rest of the meal. The next day he comes to shul, and he sees, oh wow, this poor person who came to his house is in the hospital. He's sick. He has food poisoning. So like, wow, he was healthy yesterday. That's amazing. How did he get sick? So okay, he tells his wife said, you had something to do with it, maybe you should go visit. So he goes to the hospital and visits, okay, and then he comes back the next day to show and says, Kfura, there'll be a burial, this person died. He tells his wife said, you probably had something to do with it, you better go to the funeral. So he comes back from the funeral with a big smile on his face. His wife said, what are you smirking about? So he said, you know what, well, imagine, just for $1, I was able to fulfill Hachnasas Archim, Bikar Cholim, and Lebayas Hames. So obviously, we all have to, we see how crazy that is, and we have to realize when in life, it's always a balance of different values, whether it's an Aseh Docha Los Aseh, not doing the Aseh versus the Lav, but in life, we're always challenged with different values, competing values. We always need the Mishkal HaChasidus and to make the proper choices in life.